Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. We're going to do things a little differently today. Clayton Shirt, who is a traditional knowledge holder with the COH, has graciously agreed to join us today and open and close us with ceremony. So I will be handing over to him before we get started. So over to you, Clay.
Okay, miigwech. Thank you. I'm going to paint a picture for us before we start. Traditionally, a ceremony, it's just a knowledge holder, knowledge keeper slash elder, somebody like that would begin the ceremony. So it is a ceremony. It's a very quick ceremony. So been a few years since we've all moved. So we're in the land of Zoom. And I think I'm getting okay with it now. I think I'm okay with it, getting better at it. It is challenging for someone because we would all be in a circle. We'd all be together. And in that circle, there would be a center. There would be a fire. There would be something. We would smudge. Somebody would invite spirit in, right? Invite the ancestors in to be with us, to help us, to guide us, and all of this. And that's a ceremony. So there's sweet grass or sage and an offering of tobacco. And that's how we do things traditionally with but we're in the land here of Zoom. And it is in the beginning, it was very challenging for me to do something like this. So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna and then just take a moment or two. And here's the thing with our ceremonies, our circles. No one's excluded. Right? There's only one requirement, and that is you are a human being. Right? Our four-legged friends, the crawlers, the swimmers, the flyers, our relatives, they have their ceremonies. Right? But we have ours. And they're from, and we're over 500 nations here and on this place called Turtle Island, and they all have their ceremonies. A little different, protocols are different, but the essence is the same. It's a circle. It's us getting together as human beings and offering our prayers to the earth, to the sun, to the sky, to creation, and asking and giving thanks for this wonderful gift, right? Called our lives, right? We are these magnificent beings, right? We are the human beings, and we're magnificent beings because we were given this gift called our lives. And as a human being, it's challenging because so many of us, I'll just point this out, we all come to the circle sometimes with these views, religious views, agnostic views, atheist views, spiritual views, but we can all agree on this one thing that my elders always told me, that we can always agree on this one thing, that we are the people, that we are the human beings, right? Before we're anything else. So we humble ourselves. Where I come from, to remind ourselves of this, the elders always reminded me of this, that the sacredness of our lives and how amazing we are as human beings. We're magnificent beings, but we come with humbleness, right? We humble ourselves and all of that. So that's what a ceremony is. And somebody like myself, a practitioner, I'm not really comfortable with the word knowledge keeper, knowledge holder, elder. I'm more of I'm just elderly, okay? And just put it that way. All right. An elder is somebody with tremendous wisdom and knowledge and all of this. And I'm just this person is struggling like everyone else, trying to reconnect to that circle, right? Because I see the power in that circle. I see the power of when the people get together and work together and 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 come up with solutions together as a collective, right? Whatever issues we're facing. Right? all of that. So that's our ceremonies. That's what we do. So it's just a basic ceremony. It's really primal. It's the beginning. And we just say miigwech. So I'll begin in this language, because there's so many of us. But at first, I'll say my name is Clayton Shirt. My spirit name is Running Wolf. I am of the Cree Nation, Potawatomi, and Irish and Scottish. I am originally from Treaty 6, Alberta, Plains Cree, but I live here in Toronto, and Toronto is my home. And I've been here since the 70s. I'm a father of 3. I've been married to my life partner, the love of my life, Linda, for 30 years. And I have 1 grandchild. And I am from my parents were Pauline Shirt. My father is Vern Harper. My grandfather was Felix Shirt. My grandmother is Louisa Shirt. Right? And this is where I come from. That's my family. So that's me in a nutshell. So we'll begin a traditional opening. So take a moment. I always like to say to people, take a deep breath, just breathe, right? Close your eyes and whatever you need to do to ground yourself. So with that, I just say miigwech. I say thank you. I want to thank our first mother of all mothers, our mother, the earth, for providing the gifts to sustain this beautiful gift called life. I give thanks to her. I pray to her. I pray for her in gratitude for everything she provides for us, the people. And so with one mind, one heart, I say all my relations to her. I love you. I say thank you. I offer my prayers I ask the spirits, the grandfathers, the grandmothers to look this way wherever we are, to look this way and to help us, to guide us in a good way, in a loving way, to clear our minds, help us to clear our minds, to open our hearts just a little more. I humbly say, I ask them to be with us and be with you wherever you are, so we can have a good conversation today and serve and help our sisters and brothers and the people. I say with one mind, one heart, I say thank you to Father Sky, that spirit world. I say thank you, all my relations. I give thanks to the sun, grandfather, son for a new day, a new beginning, for bringing the light, for bringing the warmth, for making the medicine grow for us to heal ourselves. I say thank you to grandfather, son, and many things you do for us, grandfather, son, for this day. And I give thanks to you for this day, this moment. And if I have done anything wrong in the past, I have this day, I have this moment, and I am grateful for this to make it right. And I humbly say thank you, grandfather, son, for the day. So with one mind, one heart, I say all my relations to you. I offer my prayers. We offer our prayers from our hearts. I pray to you. I pray for you in gratitude. Grandma Moon, you are so beautiful. In the night, you bring light to the night. I love you from my heart of hearts. Again and again, I pray to you in gratitude. As my babies sleep, as we sleep, you do this for us. You put the rivers, the lakes, the oceans into order for us. For we acknowledge this. We remember at this moment, for water is life, the sacredness of water. We say thank you, Grandma, for doing this for us, the people and our relatives. So with one mind, one heart, I say all my relations to you, Grandma. I love you. I say thank you for everything you do for us and many other things. All my relations to you. I offer my thoughts, my prayers, my heart to you in gratitude, great mystery, for there is nothing beyond you. I say thank you for bringing us together. May we have a good conversation today. We come together to serve the people. May we always have this in our minds and our hearts, why we are here, to serve the people, to help. I ask for the blessings for our loved ones, our children, while we are working for the people. to bless our children, to bless our loved ones with kindness and compassion and love. I say thank you, Creator, for bringing us together. And I say thank you for the gift called life. All my relations. Miigwech, miigwech, miigwech. Thank you for allowing me to say that simple prayer today. It's a very simple prayer. It's a basic prayer. And what I've just pointed at is Indigenous thought. That's how we've always seen things from coast to coast. We are the people. We are, and I just want to say thank you for allowing me to say that simple prayer that I try to live by every day of my life, and I fail miserably at it. So, but I keep trying. So thank you for allowing me to say that. All my relations. Miigwech. Pass it on to whoever I need to pass it on to. So
Thank you so much for that, Clay. With that wonderful introduction, I will get us started off with the rest of today's session. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us for today's Prevention Matters panel session. Prevention Matters is an online panel hosted by the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, where we dive into what it really means to prevent homelessness in our various communities. Most of us in the sector already know that prevention is necessary if we want to solve the current housing crisis. However, the series exists because if we want to address homelessness through prevention, we must be clear on what prevention means. And so, what does prevention actually look like in practice? What does it involve? To delve into these questions, Prevention Matters invites brilliant people connected to the sector to talk about the work they've done to advance prevention, along with the lessons they've learned along the way. The impacts of colonialism on Indigenous housing are vast, complex, and ongoing, and we cannot understate how devastating those impacts continue to be today. To honor National Indigenous History Month this year, today's conversation will focus on Indigenous homelessness and explore how Indigenous-led and culturally based programs can be connected to prevention. Today's conversation will be hosted by Kathy Fournier, who I will tell you more about in just a minute, and she'll be speaking with our guests about some of the work that is being done so far and how this can expand as a potential starting point towards progress in the homelessness sector. However, before we get into it, I wanted to remind you that these sessions are not your typical webinar. Your participation is a key part of this experience, and so we strongly encourage you to engage among yourselves in the chat and ask any and all questions you might have during our open Q&A in the second half. I also wanted to remind you that your feedback is very important to us. And so if you have any thoughts on how we could improve your experience, or if you just want to send some words of support, please take a moment to make use of our feedback form, which Rachel will be posting in the chat, because we do want to hear from you. This session will be recorded and shared publicly on our YouTube channel. And so if you'd like to maintain your privacy, I'll invite you now to turn off your video and rename yourself using the tools at the bottom of the screen. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please reach out to myself or my wonderful colleague Rachel, who said hi in the chat, for support, and we'll be able to help you out. It is important to pay respect to the traditional guardians of the land which many of us are calling in from today. The Canadian Observatory on Homelessness recognizes the long-standing and ongoing relationship that Indigenous peoples have with Turtle Island, which includes unceded and traditional land, and also includes the land known as Canada. Since we're gathering online, a single land acknowledgement doesn't capture the richness of our many locations. However, we wanted to take a moment to encourage you to learn something new about the history of the land where you reside today. Rachel will be sharing a resource in the chat where you can look up a particular city, county, or even an entire province and learn about the territories, languages, and treaties of that land. If you're watching the session back as a recording on YouTube, this resource will be linked in the description or somewhere on the webpage, and so I still invite you to check it out and learn something new. The Canadian Observatory on Homelessness is based in York University, Toronto, so we will share their land acknowledgement. But as always, we invite all guests to consider their position regarding the land in which they find themselves. We acknowledge our presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. And so, without further ado, I'll be handing over today's session to Kathy, who is our wonderful host for today, to get us started. Kathy is the senior researcher on Indigenous homelessness at the COH, and she has a PhD in interdisciplinary studies focused on medical and social anthropology, as well as Indigenous studies from Dalhousie University. Kathy has mixed settler and Indigenous ancestry and is active in the urban Indigenous community in Toronto. She's also a ceremonial helper at the Native Women's Resource Center in Toronto. And so, with all that being said, welcome, Kathy. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Promise. If you could just put my slide up. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're really, as Clay said, bringing everyone together as a collective voice. And we have four great speakers today, but all of you are also part of this conversation. But before we start our discussion today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the historical factors that are a fundamental aspect of Indigenous homelessness, or what is also sometimes being called houselessness. And this is just to help provide some context for understanding, the housing crisis that we are in today. So I think that it's really important to state that Indigenous homelessness or houselessness and prevention is a very complex issue that has deep historical, structural, social, spiritual, cultural, and physical components, among other things. And so I put this quote up today. I wanted to start with this quote because I think it's really important that we recognize that, as Mi'kmaq scholar and researcher Michaela Gabriel says in a recent article that I found and just thought was just the way it framed houselessness was really important. So she says, to say that the Indigenous housing crisis is a modern problem is incorrect. Indigenous peoples have had a housing crisis for over 530 years. So this has been a result of colonization, forced displacement and relocation, the creation of the reserve system, enfranchisement, banning of ceremonies and genocide, among other things. So as she's saying here, and as I want to reiterate, there's been a housing crisis for hundreds of years. So as I mentioned, I'm just starting with this quote because I think it's a critical part of the context of current day levels of Indigenous peoples who are unhoused. So we know that Indigenous peoples are overrepresented. I think the current statistics are that Indigenous peoples in Canada make up about 4.5% of the population, yet they represent over 30% of those who experience homelessness in Canada. So I also wanted to draw attention, as you can see on my slides, to one major factor that kind of led the way for colonization, and this is the doctrine of discovery. A lot of people are aware of it, but a lot are also not. So the doctrine of discovery is a piece of history that continues to have impact on Canadian law today, despite the fact that it's been renounced by the Pope more recently, but it has impact on treaty rights. So as I mentioned, the doctrine of discovery opened the door to colonization and could be framed as, or considered, the original or the first eviction from ancestral homelands, or what led to that. So this doctrine was introduced in the 1400s by the Pope, by a series of papal bulls, and ultimately it gave European explorers permission to forcibly appropriate lands that were not occupied by Christians. The doctrine stated that any land not inhabited by Christians was deemed vacant land or terris nullius. And so that, any European that came over, they could so-called discover this land, even though this land had been occupied since time immemorial. So among other things, the doctrine of discovery also paved the way for the Indian Act. And through the ongoing impacts of this doctrine, it continues to contribute to countless inequalities between Indigenous peoples and other Canadians, among other things. So I think that this is just one piece of history, but I think it creates a foundation of, what the housing crisis that we see today. And I think that the history and the ongoing impacts of colonization make the resurgence of Indigenous culture, ceremony as a broader component of healing from some of the atrocities that occurred and the resulting trauma over generations. Like, I think we need to consider that, and that needs to be a critical and powerful factor in the prevention of homelessness. So I'm going to stop there, but I want to then now invite the four speakers that we have to introduce themselves. So I would like to, they're here today to share their experiences, their knowledges, perspectives on Indigenous homelessness or houselessness, based on the work that they do in their organizations. So I would like to start with Steve Teekins, thanks.
Okay, hi everyone. Steve Teekins here. I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Res, Native Men's Residence in Toronto. I've worked in the field of homelessness since 1995 when I was a street outreach worker. And, you know, it's always been a passionate thing for me to help people experiencing homelessness to overcome those obstacles and barriers that have led them to becoming homeless. So, the way I find that seems to work best for our people is through cultural approaches, through promoting healing and reconnection to community. So that's a little bit about me. I'll talk a little more. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Bernice, did you want to go next? Hope you're just on mute.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Gayla Kessler. My name is Bernice Camano. I am an Indigenous woman. I'm registered with the Danata Nation, which is northern BC, past the end of Vancouver Island. That's on my mother's side. I'm Kwakwakiwak on my mother's side, and then on my father's side, I'm Helsik from Bella Bella. One of the things that I often say why I do the work that I do, I have been technically homeless since I was 8 months old. And that's a story that we'll get into when I do my presentation. I'm so honored to be here, and I really appreciate everyone joining us. Gayla Kessler.
Thanks, Bernice. Janine, did you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. Hi, everyone. My name is Janine Bramadat, and I'm the Prevention Manager at End Homelessness Winnipeg. Today, I speak to you as a settler on Treaty 1 territory, as a second-generation immigrant from Trinidad, and as an ally committed to working alongside Indigenous community partners to prevent episodic and chronic homelessness. So while I'm not a direct service provider, my role involves collaborating with all 4 levels of government, community partners, and individuals with lived experience. And together we strive to align our values and work towards meaningful systems change. Ending homelessness is critically important to me because I believe that everyone deserves a safe and stable place to call home. And throughout my career, I've seen firsthand the transformative power collective systemic change has in ensuring individuals can exercise their fundamental rights. So thank you for the invitation to participate today, and also your commitment to this vital work.
Thanks, Janine. Clay, did you want to, you introduce yourself, but did you want to maybe talk a little bit about any work that you've been involved with, or
what I do? What I do. I'm not quite sure what I do. I'll just start with thank you. I'll leave it off what Steve said. You know, he said he works what he does, and then somebody like he points to our people in my direction. Somebody like me, right, who's a cultural based person, and so I help community members sort of get in touch with the culture and the spirituality, and that's what I do in the community. I've been working in the community for I've lost count. Well, let's just say when I started, I didn't have gray hair. All right, so and doing all that. I love the work I do. I love our community, and just working with people, and it's all connected. So, and helping people, giving them the space to feel safe so they can begin their healing journey. Right. That's all I do. That's all I try to do, is create a space where you feel safe enough to open your heart. Right. And that's our ceremonies. So you can heal, because it's long. I'll just get into this briefly, but we forgotten this because of colonization. It's your responsibility. This is exactly what my elders said to me in the beginning of my young life. They said, it's your responsibility and yours alone to heal yourself. And I thought about that for a very long time, but I also recognized that there has to be a support there, the system, the community, right? A family, etc., the support system. And I think that's why we're all here. We are that support system, right? We're all working in our own ways to do that. But again, so many of us have forgotten this basic thing, right? And because of trauma, etc., right? All of this, the genocide, that's what we're talking about, right? The genocide policy. Thank you for talking about the beginning of the doctrine of discovery, right? That's when it all started, right? For us. For them, it started 1,000 years ago, right? But the point is, we're talking about our people. And so it's a whole mindset. So a question, I'll just throw it out there, what I say to a lot of students, because I work at the university, I just say, hey, how do you think that policy, because that set the, like you said earlier, that set the tone for all policies, right? For every policy for the last 500 years, right? Everything. And this country itself, through Truth and Reconciliation, one of those recommendations is to denounce the doctrine of discovery, right? And this government and the government before or after probably won't denounce it. So in all of this. So when you think about it, it's like, okay, so here's the question now. How do you think that's affected your life? How do you, what I mean by that, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, how do you perceive reality, right? Through that lens. How's it affected you? It has. It's affected all of us and how we see reality, right? And this is what I mean by this is this. So getting back to that basic thing that we are the people and everyone has a right, right? There's an abundance of everything here for us, the people, right? And all of this and everything. And we seem to be quarreling over these stories, right? That we've been told to each other, these belief systems, right? It's very challenging to root out those belief systems, those negative belief systems that we seem to be plagued with as human beings, right? Our people, right? So we're just sort of looking at that and saying, okay, here's a place that I try to do, and many other people, when our ceremonies, that someone can come there and sort of, okay, I feel okay, sort of safe to feel safe. I want to feel safe so I can look at myself, look within myself and say, I want to heal. Let me heal. Connect, right? To the earth, like I said earlier, right? So that's what I do in a nutshell. Trying, and our community we're doing the best we can, right? By just we're starting with the conversations. And I'll just stop with this, as Indigenous people, historically, before pre-contact, we've always been masters of relationship building, right? That's one of our strengths as Indigenous people, building relationships with each other, ourselves, communities, etc. So that's what we're trying to do. I think what we're trying to do here again, right? Build those relationships, right? And if anything, another elder told me that he made a joke about it, but he was kind of true. He says, everybody watches these superhero movies, right? And he likes these superhero movies. He goes, Indigenous people, one of our superpower is we know how to make relationships. build relationships. And I thought about that, and I kind of chuckled, but I realized that he was telling it's true. That's what we're good at, all right?
Yeah.
Is building those relationships again, and that's through ceremony, right? All of that. So that's me in a nutshell, and working on our relationships, everything in our community. But yeah, so I'm going to stop there. Miigwech.
Yeah, that's anybody want to respond to that? Otherwise, I have some, or yeah, also say a little more before I actually ask like a more formal kind of question. Okay. So I guess, considering all the things that Clay has talked about, considering the history, kind of the foundation of how, housing, homelessness, houselessness crisis has begun, and also thinking about the ways that Indigenous houselessness or homelessness can also be considered as involving more than a physical structure to live in. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what Indigenous homelessness or houselessness prevention means to you, and what does it involve, and how does it inform the work that you do? So I'm wondering if anyone wants to volunteer to talk first, or I can just ask people. Bernice,
I'd be happy to.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Steve. Yeah.
All right. So this is an interesting question. So what does homeless prevention mean to you? So I think the best way to prevent homelessness for anyone, Indigenous or not, is let's have enough housing all across Canada for people to live there, right? And not only just housing, it's got to be adequate, affordable, safe, efficient, but affordable, even deeply affordable, right?
Yeah.
I know in Ontario, the definition for affordable housing is 80% of what market rent is. So let's use some round numbers. I'll give you an example. So say if one bedroom is $2,000 a month, the Ontario government thinks it's affordable if it's 80% of that, so about $1,600 a month. That's not really affordable to many people. So we need deeply affordable housing. So that's one of the things. And I know NAMI Res, we actually do that. We, not only operate shelters and have street outreach programs, and we have a continuum of care. Right now, we have 3 new affordable housing projects in the works, deeply affordable. One will be done the end of this month. And before we're even open, we already have it full. We have 2 other ones in the works. And we need more folks doing some of the heavy lifting and getting some of the housing off the ground. It's, the cure to end homelessness is so simple. It's housing. That's all it is. And it's unfortunate in Canada that housing has become such a complicated thing. I know that land has become very much of a commodity where it has value. And of course it has value. Our people's always thought and believe that our land has value, but not in a monetary sense. So if we can get Canadians to move away from this notion of monetary value on housing, I think, and have it more of a humanistic value, where it should be a place where human beings can live and thrive, I think we'll be better off and more opportunities will open up. I would say the second thing to prevent homelessness is for Indigenous is, we have a lot of young people, a lot of our youth that are in care of child welfare societies. It's a symptom that keeps going in regards to intergenerational trauma. I know many First Nations families have experienced intergenerational trauma stemming from the days of residential schools, which eventually their offspring had, gone through being in care, and then sometimes their children as well. So we need to break that cycle. One way to do it is through healing, but also the child welfare agencies, many of them are now First Nations child welfare agencies who have assumed responsibility and now, are responsible for managing the care of a lot of children that are in care that are First Nations, and that's a good thing. Far too long, Canada's colonial approach to working with Indigenous peoples has always been an assault or attack on our children. reaching from the days of residential schools to removing our children based on Euro-Canadian values and norms and not Indigenous norms. So we have to reduce the number of children going in care. And for those who are in care, we have to invest in helping them with a lot of life skills so that when they do leave care, they're able to function and thrive on their own. And we need more housing, plain and simple. And, if there can be transitional housing, perhaps for young people, that would be the way to do it. There's a whole plethora of ways to help young people to integrate into community when they leave care. Then finally, the third one would be, we have an over-representation of Indigenous peoples in corrections all across Canada, in the federal and provincial systems. NamiRes, where I work, we run the only, that's right, I said the only for Indigenous by Indigenous halfway house bed program in the province. And it's only 5 beds. We're highly successful. 2 years ago, every guy that came through our door from federal corrections on parole successfully completed the program in their parole. And, they were integrated back in the community with us helping them along the way. When you hear about the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in corrections, you never hear about the underrepresentation of Indigenous service providers helping people reintegrate. I've been trying to expand our correctional services for at least the last decade, and I haven't really gotten anywhere. I've had federal ministers visit our space and be impressed. They talk a good game, but their actions are very limited. I'm thankful that our friends here at COH are doing an evaluation on our corrections programs, because I think it's a crime. That's right, a crime to not allow Indigenous service providers provide interventions for people leaving corrections and helping them reintegrate back in the community. We're the experts on our own culture. It should always be for Indigenous by Indigenous doing the service provision. Canada for far too long has had non-Indigenous people being decision makers for our communities and endorsing a paternalistic approach. I think it's time that, perhaps some of the decision-making powers get let go and allow our own communities to make our own decisions for ourselves. The models that have been in place since Confederation or even prior to that have not worked. I think our peoples know what we're doing. In fact, I'm sure of it. And there's lots of models there's not lots of models of success. We're the only one in Ontario, but we're successful. And I know every day we can beat our non-Indigenous providers and helping Indigenous peoples reintegrate back in the community. And you know why we're successful? Because we have Indigenous staff, because we have cultural safety, and we can understand where these folks came from. I come from a First Nation community, Nipissing, and I know the struggle. I didn't read about my family's history in books. I lived it. So I think we're in a unique position to be able to overcome a lot of these barriers. So I'll stop there and allow my guest panelists to say a few words, because I realize I'm on a little bit of a rant. So anyway.
No, thanks, Steve. That's great. Anyone else want to jump in? Bernice or Janine? Bernice? Yeah.
So again, Gayla Kessler. As I did mention at the beginning, so what does Indigenous homelessness mean to me? So I am a survivor of the 60s scoop. I was actually apprehended when I was 8 months old. And I grew up in the foster care system, so I actually know what it looks like and know what it feels like. And I struggled hard to come to a place where I'm actually incredibly healthy and doing the work that I do. I'm actually really fortunate that I do work for the Portland Hotel Society, which is based out of Vancouver, and I actually live in Victoria. So they actually understood the concept of what decolonization looks like in the Victoria area. So they actually hired me as the Indigenous outreach worker. This is my office behind me here. And so that was a step in the right direction. What I bring to the table is my understanding of the depth of pain that people endure living in a colonized system. When people walk through my door, you know, they know that they're safe, and safety is so important. One of the hardest things that I'm aware of is making connections with the people on the street. How do they feel safe? How do they know they're okay? The systems that we work in are so broken and disconnected that it's really a challenge. You know, when somebody walks through my door, we'll sit down and talk about, I'll share my history, my story, my pain with them. And then they know that they're safe. And that's really, really important in the work that I do on the street every day. And in the building, I work actually out of 4 buildings. I have a massive caseload, but I'm really good with it. I think one of the things that's really important, as we've all mentioned here, is the culture, the teaching of that. I know historically that working with people and coming to that place where there is trust is probably the most important part of the work that we do. I'm going to share a story about a fellow that I brought into my building, and he was so broken by the system. He probably lived in dumpsters for probably years and years and years, and he wouldn't look at anybody. He wouldn't talk to anybody. And I talked to management here, and we agreed to bring him in. And it took him a long time, you know, to feel safe and so, you know, and talk with us. So when he first came in, he'd never talk. He'd just, he'd never talk. And, you know, we've moved him into another building. We've moved him out of this building to another building. And he's talking like crazy, you know, and like staff is so excited. It's a long journey when you're working with the people on the street, and safety and having Indigenous people, because my agency is not Indigenous. I'm Indigenous, and for them to be that, you know, perceptive about how much work I can do with the community was, I'll always appreciate that, and we work well together. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Bernice. Janine, did you want to jump in here? I understand you work at End Homelessness Winnipeg, right? Which is an Indigenous-led.
Yes, it is an Indigenous-led organization. Yeah, and speaking from a perspective as an ally, Indigenous homelessness to me means a responsibility to locate the truth as to why and how Indigenous populations continue to be overrepresented, not only in the homelessness sector, but in other systems such as the CFS system and justice system. And it also means a responsibility to act and use the teachings and the lessons and the experiences that I'm privileged enough to work with, you know, people who are experiencing various levels of vulnerability due to intergenerational trauma and colonization and institutional racism. And I want to better understand what their priorities are. And, you know, my responsibility is to first and foremost listen. So for that Indigenous youth who is searching for a sense of belonging and identity, what would culture and connection to land mean to that person? What would access to elders and knowledge keepers mean to that person? And then conversely, what is the consequence if we don't co-facilitate access to culture? So, you know, what does the rejection of culture look like, and that internalization of guilt and shame and and how that's manifested, right? So I think it's a lot of listening. It means listening. It means acting as a responsible conduit in some of these conversations, and also watching for trends. So looking at like the pathways into homelessness and asking questions as to why that's happening, why it continues to happen. I think Indigenous homeless prevention means responding to inequality and inequities, and like paying attention to what those inequities look like. So for example, in a school system, what does inequity look like? Um, to me, I look at, rates of expulsion, rates of absenteeism, and then graduation rates among Indigenous youth. And so if we're seeing lower rates of graduation, what's happening? Going to the schools and asking, how are you creating an inclusive environment? Are you hiring Indigenous educators? The school system is distrusted, and for valid reasons. So how can we recognize that, root that in the truth of why that is, and also create intention behind creation? Yeah, I think it's also, in the process of acting as that agent, carrying these lessons forward in conversations while we are still operating largely in a colonial system, which can be challenging. So working towards dismantling existing policies and regulations, legislations, and laws that continue to perpetuate systemic racism and discrimination. And so the exciting piece of prevention work is the creation piece, right? So what are we looking to create? How are we going to use these teachings and these lessons and these observations in a good way? So some of the work, is rooted in policy. One of the things we're trying to do, coming back to what Steve was talking about, for folks in provincial corrections, we're lobbying to open up the EIA regulations to allow people to attach to EIA prior to release from provincial corrections, so that they have a damage deposit. And so it's things like, these antiquated laws that create massive challenges when we're looking at stable housing. We're also in Manitoba starting this journey with duty to assist. So what would duty to assist look like in Manitoba? How do we bring, all 4 levels of government together, and lived experts and community partners to have this dialogue around a Winnipeg-based, Manitoba-based model that would embed in legislation a responsibility for government to respond to the homelessness crisis in an appropriate, culturally based way. So I think as an ally, that's the work that I aim to do, and that's the responsibility I hold. But it starts with having truthful conversations.
Thanks, Janine. Oops. Sorry, my screen changed for a second. Moment of panic. Well, thanks everyone. Yeah, so it sounds, I'm hearing, Steve talking, housing is as a basic human right, but there's multiple layers to it, right? Like thinking about institutional level things, and including the child welfare system, education system, the prison system. And then Bernice, I'm also hearing you talk about the importance of that one-on-one relationship with people that are actually experiencing homelessness, and that feeling that, you talked about too, Clay, like feeling that the person feels safe and that they're able to actually, begin that healing process, or, begin it anyways. So I'm just wondering, we can move on to, how much more time do we have for questions, Promise?
We'll give it like another, let's say, a little over 10 minutes. So
Okay. So I'm just wondering, maybe we can move on to just thinking about Indigenous homelessness prevention. And, there are Indigenous-led organizations in Canada, but I think there's definitely more organizations that are not Indigenous-led. And so just wondering what advice or suggestions that you have for non-Indigenous organizations who do provide programming or supports, or who, or who want to or are going to. Does anyone want to start? Bernice?
I think I'll jump in if I could.
Okay, sure.
So I'll admit I'm biased, okay? I am for empowering our people to do our work. I don't think any Indigenous community ever asked non-Indigenous organizations to hire Indigenous staff and do that work on behalf of our communities. And if you do work for one of those organizations, I'm not going to try to chastise you or make you feel bad or lay a guilt trip. But this is a hard fact and a real reality. I know at NAMI Res, we've had some wonderful Indigenous staff who are fabulous. We train them well. And then they get scooped up by non-Indigenous organizations with deeper pockets and better benefits and can pay more. But I don't recall anybody in our local community here in Toronto ever asking these organizations to set this sort of stuff up. Recently, a good friend of mine left us. He said, I'm gonna work at this so-and-so place, and I won't name them. And my new role is the Indigenous case manager. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. You're gonna be the only one? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, what do they call the other case managers? Right? So I wonder what their titles are, but it's just case manager. So, I know many organizations that do set up Indigenous departments, they don't have Indigenous folks on their board. They don't have community buy-in to do that sort of work. So my advice, which again is biased, and I'll say so, is support Indigenous organizations to actually do the work for our own community. The advantage we have is that we're culturally safe. We don't need to hire people with lived experience because Indigenous peoples that work for Indigenous organizations often have that lived experience already. And we don't give a special title to them that pays them less, that's less than a living wage and doesn't entitle them to benefits or tenure in their job. We'll hire them as the title of staff, and they get full-time work and they get to work with their community. And if they've been there, done that, that's awesome, right? So the other thing is a lot of Indigenous organizations across homelessness and other sectors constantly deal with chronic underfunding. So, encourage funders to up their game. In Western Canada, the majority of Indigenous peoples, the majority of homeless people are Indigenous peoples. I don't understand how non-Indigenous organizations are making an impact on Indigenous homelessness when the majority of their clients are Indigenous. And I know in some of the Western provinces, there isn't enough Indigenous organizations leading the way. So, my advice to non-Indigenous organizations is be allies, support your Indigenous partner organizations, and allow them to lead the charge and lead the way. So that's my advice to non-Indigenous organizations. It's not reconciliation if you hire Indigenous staff for your non-Indigenous organization. It's creating brain drain for Indigenous organizations who often can't compete with the higher salary ranges that non-Indigenous organizations offer. Reconciliation would be, there being enough resources for Indigenous organizations to grow and thrive and be able to meet the growing demands and needs that are out there for Indigenous communities. So, yeah, that's my piece on that.
Thanks, Steve. Bernice, did you want to jump in?
I do. I really appreciate what you shared there, Steve. One of the challenges that we face in an urban area is, where is the money? You have to become a nonprofit, and then you have to go through all of these, your agency, your program has existed for many years, but struggling to get there is really a challenge. In Victoria, we have an organization called IOW, Indigenous Outreach Workers, and we all work for different agencies. And one of the things we talk about is becoming a nonprofit, so we can do that. But then we have to go to the government and say, we're legit, we're good, we're this, and create that. But that really requires time commitment for somebody to do all of that. In my position, my contract was put together by a fellow out of Vancouver, and I don't work for the company. I'm technically seconded to PHS. My money actually comes from First Nations Health Authority. I don't get paid by PHS. You know, so I think that the steps that they took on my behalf to work with the people in this building was a step in the right direction. I would love, you know, I always say when I win that $7 million, I know where it's going, and everybody in the community knows what I'm going to do with that $7 million because I can never walk away from what I do. You know, I'm lived experience. I have that passion in my heart to hold people up in the community that have fallen through every crack that there is, you know. And one of the things I always say is that I do not believe in miracles. I believe in moments where we make a difference in somebody's life. And that's how I walk in the world, and that's what I do in the world. And sadly, because of the complications of the colonized system, I can't do anything any differently than what I'm doing, you know. So I always want people to remember that as much and as hard as I work to make a difference in the lives of the homeless Indigenous people in Victoria and on any street. You know, my kids, and you know, they hate going for a walk with me because I can't walk by anybody without acknowledging them. You know, but sadly we work in a system where actually being able to attain what I would love to see, what we would all love to see, is our people taking care of our people, is complex, and it's not an easy process, but that never stops me. I just continue doing the work that I do, how I can do it, and those are the only tools that I have. Gayla Kessler.
Thanks, Bernice. Janine, did you want to?
I think the only thing I would like to add is, you know, working at an Indigenous organization means having a center to come back to. And so, you know, really taking the time to look at what those guiding principles are in your work and how that translates to different situations. Recognizing that indigeneity is not monolithic. And so making sure we have equitable representation. And then the two other points I wanted to add quickly were just ensuring that we're promoting Indigenous data sovereignty throughout these processes. So, you know, knowledge extraction is not reconciliation, and making sure that that is well respected, well communicated, that ownership of data and how that's communicated back to communities. And then also just being mindful of how some of these projects, pilots, programs are being evaluated. I think we again have carried forward this like idea of quantitative data, and you know how we are assessing, evaluating, and funding some of these programs. And really, we need a holistic assessment tool. So using, you know, the sacred circle as a way to ground some of, you know, the evaluations on how well we're doing in the systems change work. So I think those are the only things I'd like to add. Thanks.
Thanks, Janine. Clay, we have a couple minutes left. Did you have anything you wanted to add to this conversation?
Only a couple of minutes, Cassidy, you know me.
That's why I said it.
That's what you said. No, I think I just want to appreciate everyone's words, and I think you hit everything on the nail with what's going on, and because what I'm hearing is you're talking about the nuts and bolts of everything, the system and all that, and then the broader stuff of the whole system, right? In the beginning, the beginning of the beginning. So the nuts and bolts, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Don't know much about that, but I'll just say this. Steve's absolutely right, because I used to work where Steve works. I did the circles and everything, and I left because I couldn't pay my rent.
Yeah.
I got scooped up by a university, right? That's the reality of that. And so I had to, and so I had no choice. It was either I become homeless, right? So the point is, now I'm at a university and I make a living wage. That's it, right?
Yeah.
All of this, the
Yeah.
reality of that. And so that we're trying to work together, but I just point again of building those relationships again with agencies. And that's on an individual level now, right? That's you go in there. It's another way of saying it. One light at a time, right?
Mhm.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Going in there, having those conversations with these agencies, and we all want the same thing, right? We all want to end homelessness, right, or decrease it, right? There's always been a homeless problem here. It's just gotten out of control,
Yeah.
right? And the reality is that what I'm trying to do with traditions and medicine, I had to go help people with trauma. I had to go to another part of Turtle Island, across to the Amazon, and have conversations with the indigenous population there about their medicines helping our people deal with trauma, right? And having those conversations with them and saying, okay, but I realized, I just want to say this, Toronto, and I'm on a lot of boards and everything, trying to talk, I'll talk to anybody who's willing to listen. Right? I don't care who you are. Right? Like, I'm willing to talk to you if you're willing to listen and you're willing to help. Right. And I'll just say this about Vancouver. Vancouver is a fallen city. That's the reality of that city. It has fallen, right? It's uncontrolled. What's going on down there, the city, it's just like, that's how they see it, right? And they've moved on, right? And all of this, that's how they see it. The capitalists, they see it, and they don't care, right? And everybody's trying to do things. And now what I'm trying to work on, and what we're trying to work on in Toronto, is to see that we don't want that happening to Toronto now, right? Where they just move on, right? And they just say, okay, right? And so what we need to sort of get together and mobilize and have these conversations with each other and say, look, right, we need to do something about this homeless crisis of tent cities, everything, downtown, everything, all of that, or else they're going to move on. The reality is that they've already talked about it. They're already they're talking about it already, because the green belt, they're trying to open up the green belt, right, in Toronto, right? And that land there was supposed to be for agriculture, for food, right? And so the capitalists, or whoever they are, they got names, but the point is they're trying to do that, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking at it, the patterns. My point is all you got to do is follow the patterns, right? That's all you got to do, is just look at the patterns, what's going on here. And so we need to really have these conversations and really have and talk about these things, because then Toronto becomes a fallen city, right? Where you have hundreds and hundreds of people homeless, right? Like parts of the United States. And it's so bad that it's going to take them generations to recover from that, right? And so this is my concern, right? This is my fear when I see Toronto, when I look at Toronto, all of this. And it's really important that we recognize that reality. We see it for what it is, right? And else Toronto will be, and they'll just move on, right? And they'll just migrate somewhere else, right? All of this. And then who's there? Who's there? My people are there, right? The indigenous population are there, left behind. So it's really important that I think that we understand that, we look at it, and we say, okay, what can we do, right? We work out the nuts and bolts and everything, the bigger picture, everything. I'm a big picture guy. All of this, we know that the historical, the trauma, the history lesson, all of this. If you don't know it, you should look at it, right? And everything. So I'm trying to come up with a solution here. I don't have an answer for you. I really don't, right? I'm riddled with, just like everyone else, riddled with fears and doubts and insecurities, right? I'm not seeing reality clearly here, right? Because I'm trying to get back to who I am as an indigenous person, as a human being, right? We can say the word, We seem to be stuck in this dimension called human, not understanding the dimension of being, right? We are the human beings, and we have this gift besides life, our intelligence, right?
Yeah, use it.
So what I'm saying to you, what I'm trying to say is, I don't trust any of you, right? On one level, right? Because the reality of that, right? And to say, look, okay, be honest with ourselves, be truly honest with ourselves and say, look, we don't have these answers. All right. But if we get together, we mobilize, we come together and we reconcile with each other. And again, reconciliation just means one thing, right? Friendly relations, right? But we have to do that with ourselves first, right? All of this. And so getting together and saying, this is what we need to do, right? Get past all these race things, gender things, class things, etc. All those things, right? Those identities that everybody is bickering about, right? Quarreling about, so much energy invested in, right? There's nothing wrong with those identities. I'd argue that class thing very strongly, right? The reality, this is a class-oriented system, right? That's the reality of this system, right? I am not a Marxist. I am not a capitalist. I am not any of those things, right? I am a Anishinaabe. I am indigenous, right? And we have a way of doing things. And so what we're asking is for people to support us in these things, right? And we'll figure it out, right? We will. Because through our intelligence and through our collective intelligence, we can come up with the solutions that we need to do, right? Because all these other systems have seemed to be failing us, right? If you go to the left, you go to the right, you go to the center, right? All of this. And so there's a reality that the percentage, the ones who are in power, they have already made up the deal. They've already this is a percentage that they can sustain or accept of homelessness, right? That's the reality of that when you look at the history of homelessness, right? And they've already moved on. They've already said, yeah, this is a percentage. We can deal with this. We accept it. We'll isolate them. We'll put them into parts of a city and we'll move on, right? And everything. So when you think of it that way, I'm like, oh, okay, that's our people, right? That's us. So what are we going to do, right? I have no answers, right? But I know if we get together and we have these conversations, and we'll come up with the solutions. And I point to young people, and I'm constantly saying to young people, don't believe a fucking thing I'm telling you. All right. Don't even agree with me. Just trust in thought. Right. And say, I think, I feel, I see. I recognize this reality. I see it for what it is. I see this. Right. And everything. And here's an interesting thing. I'm in a university where I work with research and Indigenous research and Western research methods and all of this. And in my own journey in language, pre-contact, right? We had no word for the word belief, right? That word itself was never here, was never said, right? It got me thinking about that word, right? It's a very powerful word, is it not? Right? And everything. We have a word for truth. We have a word for all of these things. But I realized, because I talked to every tribe that I could come across, right? But as Indigenous people, we have words for toasters now and, automobile and everything. But I'm just talking about that word, right? It's such a powerful word. Words have power. And so what I'm saying is it's like we question these beliefs that we're plagued with, that there's something wrong with us, right? And maybe maybe we start there, right? And having all this. And so I'm not saying don't believe in things, but we need to question these things. And I have again, it goes back to I'm not a capitalist, right? I don't see the value in it, but I'm not a Marxist either, right? So who am I? That's the question that I'm asking myself. And I'm saying to young people, and people say, who are you? Right? And was, as a human being, the deeper sense of that, we can figure this out, right? This
So I
this
think that
where we are, all of this. So I'm going to stop with there, and I don't want to offend anyone, right? But I'm desperately trying to have conversations with people and say, yeah, we need to do something now about this city, right? Because I have a granddaughter who lives in this city. So, miigwech.
Yes, miigwech, Clay, agreed. And I think some of what you're talking about ties into what Steve was saying too, around, you know, the commodity, like housing and land has become a commodity, and it's actually, yeah, the rich get richer, right? So yeah, we're kind of running into, well, now we have some questions from the audience. So one of them is, yeah, it's a bit long, so I'm going to try and summarize here, but I think it's in response to what you were saying, Steve. So if non-Indigenous organizations should not be doing the work of Indigenous organizations, then how do these non-Indigenous organizations begin to meet the needs of the Indigenous families they are supporting? I'm not questioning any opinions here, just curious on what kind of path can be created to begin to support the many houseless Indigenous peoples across Canada, while thinking that it is ideal for, you know, for organizations and for Indigenous people to be leading this. I don't know, have any responses? Because I guess what I'm hearing too, like there's like, yes, it needs to be Indigenous led, Indigenous formed, and all, but you know, there's things have to shift, and so that shift is not going to happen all at once. And so I think that's partly what this question is getting at. What's the best way to support Indigenous organizations then? And while also, you know, not abandoning people that they might be Indigenous people that they might be working with.
So I acknowledged at the beginning I was biased, eh? I am very much so. I'm always a big supporter of our community. I think our people are extremely resilient and have overcome a lot. We're probably the most adaptable people in the world because we've had to just to survive. So I think one thing would be a level playing field. That would be lovely. That's not reconciliation. That's just making things equal, right? So a level playing field where Indigenous organizations are able to retain the good staff that they work with, that start to grow and really excel and create good working relationships with Indigenous folks experiencing homelessness, where you wouldn't have to worry about them getting poached away by a non-Indigenous organization with much deeper pockets. So, you know, choice is always a good thing. If an Indigenous person, for various reasons, may want to go to a non-Indigenous organization, which does happen. I know some of our communities are small, and often people are sometimes concerned about perhaps their issues getting out in community because they went to an Indigenous organization where they may question issues around confidentiality. So I get it. I guess where I get stuck is, you know, non-Indigenous organizations, it's not within their mission statements 9 times out of 10 to support Indigenous community. Often in their governance structure, they don't have Indigenous peoples within their board. They're not responsive to our community. They're not accountable to our community. So if those things could somehow be addressed, but again, that would create a brain drain again, because a lot of Indigenous organizations, like my own organization, we're looking for board members, Indigenous ones, and it's hard to find them. So, yeah, I really don't have an easy answer to that question. But if there was a funding parity, I think that would definitely help Indigenous organizations. It would give us maybe not a competitive advantage, but at least equality. And go from there. I know not everyone's going to agree with me, but that's fine. That's a philosophy I have in my life, and it's worked well for my organization where I work and for a lot of the staff. So I think that for Indigenous, by Indigenous, always the way to go. Canada, we've never experienced that ever. Well, maybe at the beginning when settlers came, when the first homeless people came here over 500 years ago. We've been doing the work with homeless people ever since. So we're good at it. We know we are. And, you know, we've never had full autonomy or decision-making power, all the resources we needed to be able to make a difference. And it's always been an uphill battle. So, you know, if we can level that hill and take away the battle part, I think our community members will expand, and our own organizations will expand.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Because yeah, I think some of the concern is, you know, if you're already in a non-Indigenous organization, they are saying how, you know, what can I do to support, you know, the Indigenous families that they work with? That is a large number. So does anyone else have any response to that? Or Steve, if you want to say more. No. Okay, well, I'll just move on to another question. And I think that, yeah, we're definitely nearing the end. So the questions are really, really long. So I'm just, Kenora moving forward is a grassroots volunteer coalition that works tirelessly to fill gaps in the community for those who are unhoused or precariously housed. Every day we do what Bernice said, believe in the moments that when we make a difference in someone's life. We are chronically underfunded, but we see success stories every day. So the question is, how do we get other community stakeholders to see the value of building this trust? What's possible for all of us when that occurs? Bernice, did you want to?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I really have to say how frustrated I am. You know, I appreciate that Winnipeg has, you know, a fair a footing, holding structural systems put in place. I live in a tiny little provincial city, and I don't have that access. But one of the things that I do is work with other outreach workers that are having to work in systems that they have no control over. And I think that I will always focus on the fact that there are 15 people at our table, and we can talk about coming together as community and doing the work as community from different organizations. And that is the most important part of how we will do the work in Victoria, because Victoria is a very small city. I actually call it a town. It's not really a big city, but you know, that's the only way that I can walk in the world and do the work that I do. I've been very fortunate to work with the university as well. We've done a number of programs around supporting the homeless community. Yeah, so I mean, I just have to keep moving forward and doing what I can because those are the only options that I have to work with.
Yeah.
We have one organization, and everyone at this table is familiar with that, and that's the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness.
Right.
And Fran is doing a wonderful job. They just opened a 44 unit building, and that's the first one that we have in Victoria. So, and I work with Fran, and I've actually moved somebody from my building into her building. So it's just little baby steps when you're, you know, doing the work that you're doing in a system that is difficult to work in, you know, and just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Bernice. Yeah. Promise, I'm just wondering if we need to stop there, or obviously we have a lot more questions here today. So obviously this is a really important conversation that is by just, yeah, very, very beginning stage of this conversation is happening today here. So obviously we need more. and perhaps we can come back together at another time or find a way to address some of these questions that the audience is posing, because I think all of them are really important. I mean, I hear today that, yeah, we need, again, I'll reiterate, we need, you know, changes that are big structural changes related to, you know, the foundation, the history, colonization, but then there's, you know, real present day material things like just having more housing. And then also, you know, the need to really ensure that programming is Indigenous led, and that the funding and resources are not being taken away from Indigenous organizations that are doing the work, but finding ways also, I think, to work within the system, right, as things do begin to shift. So yeah, I promise, do we have time for one more question or we need to stop? And thank you to everybody today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We are a little tight on time, but we can squeeze in maybe a very quick fire rapid round on one more if everybody.
Okay, sure. And I guess if people have to leave, then we'll see you later. Or see you again next time. Come on, P. So someone's saying, we support many Indigenous people of all ages who, due to addictions or other life decisions, feel they are unwelcome in or undeserving of ceremony. What can we say to help them get past this? Because they are, of course, welcome. Anyone want to?
I know our medicines are our medicines. And, you know, medicines help us heal in one way, shape, or form, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. So they're there for us.
Mm-hmm.
That might be perhaps something that they've internalized that might forbid them from using sacred medicines and coming into the circle. I know some of our elders or teachings in the past would forbid people from coming to ceremony for sometimes a minimum of 4 days. I think that, you know, if someone needs ceremony in their life and they're asking for help through that we should give it to them. I know there's a variety of schools of thought on this, but I think the key here is if someone's asking for help, let's give them help, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if they want to smudge, and if a smudge through one of our sacred medicines is what they're asking for, then I think we should give it to them, because if we don't, that might be a missed opportunity. And if they feel like being brave and asking a similar type of question in the future, they might have second thoughts. So, yeah.
Anyone else want to jump in quickly?
Me, I'll just say, I'll just echo what Steve was saying. It's that's, he just said the word, right? Medicine, right? It's like, it's there to heal you. So take the medicine, right? And that's it, right? So, and it's there for you to use and to heal yourself. But the reality is, again, you know, what Steve's talking about is there's a generation before us when how they healed themselves was through absent base. That's all there was, right? AA, etc. And now there's a new generation, and it's they've learned this other approach called harm reduction, right? And they're two philosophies, right? But they're non-Indigenous, right? And so that I say to both, I encourage everyone, use them both by any means necessary, right? To heal yourself, right? All of this. So the medicine, again, take the medicine. That's what it's for, right? So take it, right? And you'll see. So all of that. And it's really like, it's like, again, Steve, I'll just echo Steve, it's there's these two approaches, right? And everybody's coming to the circle with these approaches, right? And all of this. And so that respect has to be there for them. And I respect both of them. They both have a place, right? They both have, and they're both, and because in the past they worked. I'll talk about my father. My father he came from the streets, right? His name was Vern Harper. He came from the streets, all of this, and he became the elder of Toronto and all of this stuff. And his whole approach was through absence. That's all there was, right? And that's who he became. And so, and he recognized that other philosophy, that other view of harm reduction. But again, they're not from us, right? So what is it, right? It's our ceremony. So again, there's the medicine offer if they want the medicine to make them feel good and safe, right? Begin that journey. It's just the beginning of the beginning, we'll say, for them, right?
Yeah.
So just say miigwech with that, right? So yeah.
Thanks, Clay. Um,
I really would like to share as to what we're doing at Algonquin College in terms of like, you know, keeping our students off the street. I'd also, I need to tell you about that context in order to ask this question. Do we have time?
Okay. This will be the absolute last one because we are a little tight on time, but sure, go ahead.
Okay. So I've introduced myself in the chat, so I'll just skip over introductions, breaking protocol. I'm the Indigenous Student Counselor at Algonquin College. We've had incidents of people coming down. Students do face homelessness very often. You know, they're coming usually from rural areas. And often when they come, they don't realize, especially in the city of Ottawa, the type of difficulties that they would be having in terms of, you know, finding and securing long-term housing. Now, there's a couple of things that we've done is usually sometimes with potential students or students that we know that have just been accepted into their programs, we are now sending out information, you know, or informing them of how to navigate the housing situation here. So there's information in regards to that. The second thing that we've done is we've opened up spaces within our residence. So that has been an ongoing thing. At one point, there was 28 students some years ago, Indigenous students. It has risen to 78, and now it's risen to about maybe 120 students now. And that's so we're constantly getting people into residence. So another thing too is that we've also opened up emergency housing. Out of our residents, we have a partnership with our residents where we have 2 emergency housing where both through the counseling center here and then also through the Mamadosawin Center, which I work for at Algonquin College. They have a suite, you know, if they find themselves homeless, and they can have that suite for about 21 days. Now, this gives us time for us to connect with those students with community organizations that handle housing, like Akrazavik, which is one of the Inuit organizations, and a few others like Inagaridit. There's also the Wabano Center for Aboriginal Health, which has a housing first program. So we connect people with community resources on a way to find long-term housing while they're in our emergency housing unit. The other thing too that I would like to mention, we also have a housing coordinator, and they've just hired to help with students, you know, find housing in the Ottawa area. So those are the kinds of things that we've been doing at Algonquin College. My question is, though, many of our Indigenous students are coming from places that are rural. They're coming from families that don't have a lot of credit or good credit. And when they do go for long-term housing, these tenants or these landlords are asking for good credit checks. They're asking for, you know, a second co-signer, all these other things, and some of these students don't have that. And so I need a resource to fill that gap or to make that transition helpful for us. Does anybody have any information on how to kind of shorten that gap, that specific problem?
Yeah, anyone? I don't know of any, yeah. It's a big problem, yeah. And a very it's a practical problem. They could have a very practical solution, but
Exactly.
yeah, but it's, I don't know of anyone else, yeah.
I mean, certainly, like, I don't mind being a smoke in a larger wheel. I can only do what I can do for the Indigenous student population at Algonquin. And thankfully, we have a whole center, and we create partnerships, not just with community, but even within the Algonquin College to help out with different kinds of situations that students might find themselves in. You know, whether it's getting, trying to get emergency bursaries, whether it's getting them hooked up with a new sponsor to pay for the education that they are pursuing, but sometimes it comes down to, just small things, like, is there an agency? Is there somebody that can co-sign for them when their parents can't, you know?
I think, thanks, Vanessa. I think that it sounds like you're doing some
agency.
great work. Oh,
Can I touch on that one thing?
Sure.
I listened to you and I heard what you said, everything, and I just say this: I'm in that same boat right now. So, and I'm trying to find a house, with 5 kids and all of this stuff, and I'm trying, the reference checks and this and that, and this credit check, and all, it's insane, right? And it's just, and I'm just, all I could say to you is encourage you to get really radical about the solutions, right? Because none of us have the answer for that, right? And trust in that, and trust in your, and to get really go beyond what they give you permission to think about, right?
And
Believe in, and really say, yeah, this is what the radical, something really radical, to come up with a solution, right? And you will come up with it. And trust in spirit, trust in the earth, right? Trust in our mother, the earth, trust in grandfather, son, trust in your ancestors, right? And trust in the great mystery creator, right? There will be an answer to that, a solution to your problem, right? Because I
I'll
have
put
faith
down
in
my
that.
tobacco, Clayton.
Exactly.
Well,
Put it
and you
down
know
and
what?
just
I'm just,
burn your tobacco down.
as you guys are talking, I'm just thinking about, and then Steve, I saw your hand up, but I'm thinking about, I mean, it's worked in a smaller community. I know in PEI, there's an Indigenous organization there, and they work really closely with landlords. So they've been building relationships with the landlords, because, in PEI, if you get evicted, for example, or you can't find, like, word spreads quick. And so, but they are really, that's one thing they have done, but it's like on the ground work, trying to build those relationships with landlords so that people like that, because I think this is also, I mean, it's a practical problem, but I think it's also an example of a structural issue, like how, the way that we have decided someone could be eligible for a place to live, and then thinking about how, poverty and all of these things that are factors in that get translated down can get translated down the generations, and then you're stuck, right? So sorry, Steve, did you want to just?
Yeah, I have one solution. It's not an easy one, but I did talk to Chief and Counsel for my reserve, because last August, September, I had a number of cousins call me and say, Steve, you got an extra room at your place? I can't find a house in Toronto, and I'm supposed to go to college or university, and I'm really stuck. I don't know what to do. I'm worried I might have to drop my course.
Yeah.
It broke my heart because I didn't have space, eh? I'm my place is small as it is, and so I told our chief and council that they should invest in housing in the city. That way, our band members, when they come to Toronto for college or university where there's an abundance of them, that there's always a place for them to go to. I said it could be an employment opportunity as well for band members that live in the city, which there's lots. And it can be a win-win all around. And I said also, once if you acquire a property and own it, that you can leverage that equity in that property to be able to acquire more down the road.
Yeah.
You know, banks are
you're
always happy to give you loans to
Oh my God,
against.
you're getting into my personal life here. You know, here I've got degrees, I've got a stable job, and I can't even afford a house in my own territory, for heaven's sakes.
I'm the same way.
So imagine these students, you know,
I
like,
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's true.
yeah,
even if
this is I'm getting priced out of my homeland. That's what
I
I'm
know
doing. You
that's
know, this is
I feel the
following the
pain.
same trend that's happening in Hawaii and all these other kinds of places. I can't even afford my own house in my own territory. You know, like this is getting ridiculous, you know.
Yeah.
However, that when you talk about something radical, you know, well, then this becomes like a federal initiative that needs to take place. Here you are, you have like these condos are being sold, you know, to people that are investors from other countries, and they sit empty. And I'm sure in Toronto, you probably see that bunch of condos sitting empty, you know, and that is like the greatest shame that I would say, you know, like, but anyways,
Thank you.
that is a bigger problem, you know. I came here, you know, to see if I could find some kind of solution, you know, I mean, we've been doing some things with homelessness for Indigenous students in the Ottawa area. We've been proactive in doing these small things within our control, but but clearly more needs to be done, you know. And I was coming here for you know, kind of solutions and to do this, but I've given some solutions what we've done, you know, but that's just you know, for our students here, and still they run into a hiccup, and it has to do with because they come from poor families, you know, and these landlords are asking for like, because they know the competition is
Yeah.
fierce, they're asking for that in the sun,
Yeah.
you know,
Ask
just,
for whatever they want, it seems. Yeah.
yeah. I don't think it's quite right, but you know, it's their prerogative, it's their property, you know, but it annoys me when it happens in my territory, to
Yeah.
be quite honest with you, you know.
Thanks, Vanessa. So I think, yeah, boy, again, there's so much to talk about. And I really want to say thank you again to everyone that has joined this conversation today, including the audience. I mean, we've heard a lot of different things. And I think, again, there's big structural things and also on the ground work that needs to get done. And I think that, you know, funding is a big issue, ensuring that, you know, programs are at the very least Indigenous led, but that shift towards, you know, if non-Indigenous organizations are working and doing this work, that they have representation in ways that doesn't also create that brain drain. I think there's a lot of questions here without easy solutions, but yeah, I think that's where I will leave things today, and I'll hand it over to Promise to close, and then we'll have a close with Clay.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that, Kathy. And thank you so much to everybody who shared their perspectives and joined us today. Um, you know, this is a very complicated issue that has deep-seated and deep-rooted histories. And so it's natural that anytime we have the conversation, it's going to be complicated. There is no one solution for a problem that's caused by several different overlapping things, right? And so I say all of that to say that this conversation is one that we hope to have about it, but we truly hope to continue to have conversations that can begin to pull out those threads a little more. We understand that it will take time and that it will take more than one. And so regardless, we're really glad for everything that the wonderful panelists who joined us today were able to share, and to everybody who joined us in the chat as well for staying engaged and always being so, you know, ready to contribute, we are grateful to you as well. So, with all that being said, I will close this out briefly. I thank you all so much for joining us, especially our wonderful people who stayed all the way until the end. There are still almost 100 of you in here in the room with us, and that is incredible and just shows that people are really invested in learning more about this work. And so that's really inspiring to see. To everybody who has contributed on our panel today, to Kathy, to Clayton, to Bernice, to Janine, to Steve, thank you all so very much for your contributions. If anybody would like to get connected with any of the wonderful panelists who've contributed today, you'll see that I've put our contact information up on the screen. And so just feel free to reach out through that to whoever you're interested in, let us know, and we'll get you connected accordingly. Today's session was our last session before our summer hiatus. And so after the session, we unfortunately will not be having any in July or August, but we will be back in the fall with more powerful conversations for you all. And so until then, I would just like to wish you all a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're calling in from, and a wonderful summer, however that ends up being defined for you. And I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully at one of these later this year. I will hand back to Clay to close us out now. Thank you so much, everyone.
Rich?
Okay, Miigwech. First of all, before I say this closing prayer, I want to apologize for swearing. It's just I'm very passionate about my work, and I think of my granddaughter, and I think about her future in the city, right? And the reality is that sometimes, just like all of us, I want to run away, right? And that's the reality. We all want, to a certain part, we all want to run away and move somewhere else, right? And wherever we are, wherever you are, we all, that thought always sometimes enters our minds, right? And I say to myself, well, no, I'm not. I'm going to stay here and fight for what I need, what I think that is the right thing to do, right? For my people, right? For my community, all of this. So I think it's so important. Again, so I just apologize for swearing, but I always say this at the end when I talk to my students: please don't believe anything I just told you, right? You don't even have to agree with me. All I'm asking, and all our ancestors are asking you to do, is think. Use that gift that Creator has given you. And I noticed something with thought. When someone is at peace in their mind, that thought flows to something, naturally just flows. It's amazing to see it in elders when they're sitting quietly, and it's just that thought flows to their heart, and the compassion and that empathy they have for all living beings. It's incredible. And to witness that and to be a part of that. And I'm saying, I want some of that. What is that? Right? That love and compassion for all living beings. And I've had the privilege of sitting with some people like that and just listening to them, right? And being around them. And so I encourage you, and I know you're all out there in the field working and all of this, and you're part of that, spreading that kindness and empathy and compassion towards all living beings, the ones who are homeless, who are suffering, right, in their minds and their hearts, all of this. And so when I think about that, that's what I pray for, right? That we can help and serve our community, help our people, the human beings, to remember, right, that life is a gift, right? All of this. So with that, I just want to say miigwech to you, and I give thanks again to Creator for bringing us together, listening to each other. And I give thanks to the earth, the sun, the sky, creation, everything in between earth and sky. And I ask for the blessings for all of us in a good way, in a kind way. May our minds be clearer today. May our hearts be open a little more. And I give thanks for bringing us together. All my relations. Miigwech. See you when I see you.
Thank you, Clay.
Thank you.
Reg.